In Finland, buyers who are not citizens of an EU or EEA country are required to have a permit to buy real estate. Having a residence permit does not eliminate the need for a permit. This applies to both private individuals and companies in which at least 10% of the ownership is held outside the EU or EEA. Even if your company is registered in Finland, the decisive factor is whether the owners are citizens of EU or EEA countries. You do not need a permit if you buy the real estate together with your spouse or cohabiting partner and they have citizenship of an EU or EEA country. The seller is a close relative of yours. You buy a share in a housing company and it does not include a plot of land. How to apply for a permit? First, we will cover the permit application process for a private individual in the electronic service. Then, we will look at how to review your applications and receive decisions. Finally, we will highlight a few points to take into consideration if you apply for a permit as a representative of a company or entity. Use the Property Surveillance e-service to apply for the permit. The service will first ask you a few questions. From the services listed, choose Permit for buying property. Choose Private Citizen as the customer type and proceed to the next step. The service will then determine whether you need a permit. The questions concern your citizenship and the citizenship of the other buyer, if any, as well as shares of ownership, the seller's background information, and the details of the property. The service will direct you to continue the process if you need a permit. If the service determines that you don't need a permit, there will be no more questions. If the service indicates that you need a permit, you should have the necessary documents at hand. You can also answer the questions again if you wish. Otherwise, you can proceed. Using the e-service requires strong identification or the use of the Finnish Authenticator service. For strong identification, you need to use Finnish online banking credentials, a mobile certificate or certificate card. For the Finnish Authenticator identification service, you need to register a foreigner's identifier for yourself. More information on the different authentication methods is provided in the instructions section of the e-service. If the person filling in the application, the buyers or the buyer's representatives are unable to use strong identification or the Finnish Authenticator service, the service will provide information on other alternatives for submitting the permit application. Next, the service asks about potential authorization needs. Authorization is required if you are acting on behalf of another individual or organization. Authorization is also required when there is more than one buyer. If you need authorizations, the service will guide you through the process of obtaining them. You should request the necessary authorizations before you start to fill in the actual application. You can also find more information in the instructions section of the e-service. Next, you will fill in the application form. First, verify your identity by using the authentication method you have chosen. You are now signed in to the e-service. Start filling in the application. First, select the role in which you are using the service. Choose the language in which you want to receive messages related to your application. Fill in the buyer's details in the application. Upload a copy of your passport to the e-service. If you do not have a passport, we also accept a government-issued official identification document, travel document, or alien's passport. Please note that, in these cases, you also need to upload a copy of your residence permit. If there are multiple buyers, also fill in the other buyer's information. Select whether the seller is a private citizen or a company or organisation. Fill in the seller's details. Fill in the details of the property. Provide a more detailed description of the intended use of the property. Upload the deed of sale, draft deed or accepted bid for purchase. If you are buying multiple properties, you also need to fill in the details of the other properties. Fill in the information on financing. You will see a summary of the documents you have uploaded. If there are any mandatory documents that haven't been added yet, you can upload them at this stage. You can also preview your application. If you wish, you can indicate your acceptance of having the decision delivered to you via this e-service. Choose the language in which the decision will be delivered to you. Next, you will select how the processing fee for the permit application will be paid. Choose who will pay the processing fee. The service suggests the first buyer as the payer, but you can also select another person. Check the payer's contact details. Choose a payment method. The permit fee can be paid immediately online using online banking, a credit card or mobile pay. If you choose to pay the processing fee online, you will proceed directly to the payment service, after which your application will be submitted for processing. Alternatively, you can receive a PDF invoice by email or a paper invoice by post. By submitting the application, you confirm that the information you have provided in your application is true and correct. Your application has now been received. If you chose to pay by invoice, the invoice will be delivered to you in the manner you indicated. The processing of the application will begin when you have paid the invoice. You can follow the status of your application on the Your Applications tab. You can find your incomplete applications and sent applications on the Your Applications tab. You can supplement your incomplete applications. You can view your sent applications and follow the status of their processing. The service notifies you if you have received any requests for further information concerning your applications. If that is the case, you can add the necessary additional information to your application. You can view and download the decisions you have received. You can receive and send messages related to your application and, if necessary, supplement the information requested by the Ministry of Defence. The permit application for a company is very similar to that of a private individual. We will now cover a few points to take into consideration when filling in the form. The service determines whether the company or organisation you represent needs a permit to buy real estate. The questions concern the domicile and ownership of the company you represent. The service will direct you to continue the process if you need a permit. If the service determines that you don't need a permit, there will be no more questions. If the service indicates that the company or organisation you represent needs a permit, you should have the necessary documents at hand. You are required to have a valid authorisation in order to act on behalf of a company or entity. To apply for authorisation, please turn to the Digital and Population Data Services Agency and follow their instructions. When you have obtained the authorisation, you can proceed to the permit application for buying property. When acting on behalf of a company or organisation, select I am acting on behalf of another person or organisation. Retrieve the valid authorisation for the permit application from the e-authorisation service at swami.fi. Fill in the buyer's details and attach a statement of the ownership and actual beneficiaries. Fill in your details on the Agent tab. On the Payment tab, the company you represent will be selected as the payer by default. You can also indicate a different party as the payer. The available payment methods for a company are online payment, e-invoice, PDF invoice, and paper invoice.